Good evening. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is rapidly spreading like a deadly stain over the country. An attack from the air with war jets and missiles seemingly aimed at the capital, Kiev. Tens of thousands of refugees are fleeing the fighting or, in the cities, sheltering in subways and cellars. Europe correspondent Kari-Anne Greenbank is in the Ukraine capital and begins our coverage.
Missiles rain down on Kiev, Ukraine's capital, under fire in a pre-dawn Russian assault. A 9-storey unit block up in flames. 3 people believed to have been injured after Ukraine's military downed a Russian aircraft. Hours earlier, blasts in the city seen before they're heard. An airstrike offensive signalling full-scale war. This was an airbase in the country's southeast, while flames and what sounds like gunfire reverberates around the city of Sumy in the north. Ukrainians with no choice but to watch from their windows as the attack came from all sides, coming too close to those trying to stay safe in their homes. Thousands scrambled underground. Families packing metro stations along with prams and pets.
We are totally not same as Russians, and we don't want to be a part of Russia or any other country. It's really getting very emotional. And I cannot believe it's happening, really. And I just hope that some people in Russia may see this and just stand against the Putin and the war.
Newborn babies moved from intensive care to a makeshift bomb shelter beneath a children's hospital in eastern Ukraine. Some stayed to survey the damage, managing to survive the deadly blasts. In the northeastern city of Kharkiv, bloodied blankets were left behind in homes with their walls blown out. For those who have fled, it was the most heartbreaking of goodbyes. This father overcome while farewelling his family. It's estimated more than 100,000 people have headed to the borders.
It was unexpected, and we all want peace and quiet. We don't want war. Please, stop, because people suffer from it.
Seeking refuge in Poland.
We definitely will need world's help, and we definitely need to make sure we are all together against this.
As well as Romania and Hungary.
Oh my God, call my mom. Hey, where are you?
We're going to Germany.
Before that, about
This is plan D.
In a late-night national address, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky claiming Russia's plan is to kill him, saying the enemy has marked me as target number 1, my family as target number 2. And desperately calling on NATO for urgent membership. I have asked directly, he says. Everyone is afraid, no one answers.
So it's 1:30 in the morning, and we have just been warned that the centre of Kiev may be hit with airstrikes in the next couple of hours. So we're just relocating 5 floors down here to this bunker, and this is where we'll be sleeping tonight.
Russian forces have taken control of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant and raised their flag over a hydroelectric site in the country's north. But Ukraine is fighting back. President Zelensky declaring martial law and pledging to arm every person willing to defend the country. This video shows a Russian pilot parachuting from his obliterated aircraft close to the capital. Ukraine's military saying it has destroyed Russian tanks and killed soldiers. But the true cost of this crisis is being felt by ordinary citizens.
Kari-Anne Greenbank joins us now from Kiev. And Kari, Russian troops are right now advancing towards the capital.
Well, they are, Georgie. US officials believe that Russian troops are now around 30 kilometres away from Kiev and advancing. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is saying he is convinced Vladimir Putin is trying to force a change of government, getting rid of the current government and replacing it with a puppet regime. Now, President Zelensky has just said that he believes Russian special forces are already in Kiev trying to abduct him and seize power. He is refusing to leave the capital, but he well knows if he is captured, he could be killed. Georgie?
Carrie-Anne Greenbank in Kiev, thank you. It's not just international leaders condemning Russia's attacks on Ukraine. Around the world, there's been a groundswell of protest. And if it usually appears Vladimir Putin has suppressed dissent in his own country, courageous Russians are out on the streets, angered by the invasion.
In Vladimir Putin's hometown, St. Petersburg, the president's own people led the protests. The chants of no more war, the soundtrack to an uprising taking place in more than 40 Russian cities. We believe that conflict must be resolved peacefully without violence from any side. Russian police arresting almost 2,000 anti-war demonstrators as Putin's regime tried to quell dissenting voices. Some clashes turned violent. Arrest Putin, not me, says this protester. This elderly woman detained for a simple sign stating no war. In Tel Aviv, a Russian citizen burns her passport as rallies around the world waved the blue and yellow bands of Ukraine from London to Tokyo, Finland, Times Square.
Today I think everybody's Ukrainian.
And outside the White House. While inside the East Room,
Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war. And now he and his country will bear the consequences.
The US president unveiled sanctions hoping to cripple the foundations of Russia's economy, including cutting off more of Russia's biggest banks, freezing assets and limiting the ability to deal in dollars, pounds, euros and yen.
President Biden said he had no plans to talk to Vladimir Putin and that NATO is now more united and determined than ever.
Germany's chancellor wanting Russian leadership to pay a high price for their aggression.
These are among the darkest hours for Europe since the end of World War II.
He will never be able to cleanse the blood of Ukraine from his hands. And although the UK and our allies tried every avenue for diplomacy until the final hour, I'm driven to conclude that Putin was always determined to attack his neighbour, no matter what we did.
The United Kingdom sanctioning more than 100 Russian individuals and their entities and calling to end Russia's use of SWIFT international payment systems. The Pentagon announcing the deployment of 7,000 more troops in the coming days, not for combat, but to bolster NATO forces, with fears Putin may have eyes on another prize.
He has much larger ambitions in Ukraine. He wants to, in fact, re-establish the former Soviet Union.
As his tanks rolled out in Ukraine, Putin hosted Imran Khan, the first Pakistani Prime Minister to visit Moscow in a quarter of a century. The world watching the response from the West closely, China nursing its own territorial ambitions.
Are you urging China to help isolate Russia?
I'm not prepared to comment on that at the moment.
Beijing has ordered the evacuation of the Chinese embassy in Kiev and urged Chinese citizens still in Ukraine to fly a Chinese flag to protect themselves. China has so far refused to call it an invasion. While Russian state TV claims Ukrainians are happy to be liberated by Russian troops. But on the streets, thousands of Russians bravely and defiantly disagree.
US correspondent Alison Petrowski is in Washington, D.C. And Alison, will these new sanctions have the intended effect?
Well, look, Georgie, 48 hours ago we saw the first wave of sanctions rolled out and they didn't appear to be a deterrent to Vladimir Putin at all. If anything, Georgie, it seemed to spur him on and speed up the invasion into Ukraine. President Biden today calling for patience, saying it's going to take time before we see these new wave of measures have an impact on the Russian people and the Russian economy. But also today, Georgie, President Biden said that if Vladimir Putin isn't stopped, he may become emboldened and move on to other countries.
Alison Petrowski, thank you. The Russian assault on Ukraine has been swift, brutal and comprehensive. Nine's Lizzie Pearl joins us in the studio. Lizzie, what's been targeted so far?
Georgie, the situation on the ground is fast moving, but this is what we know about the Russian offensive so far. Russia has attacked Ukraine from the air, sea and land, from the east, the south and the north. It began with an aerial bombardment right across the country. Cruise missiles were reported hitting major cities, including Kiev, as well as military sites and key pieces of infrastructure. In the east, Russian-backed separatists began advancing on Donetsk and Luhansk. To the north, Russian troops have moved on the second city of Kharkiv, with intense fighting reported there. Russian forces also invaded from Belarus, capturing the Chernobyl power plant. That's the site of the world's worst nuclear disaster. It's reported they are now pushing towards Kiev, with Russian paratroopers landing at a strategic airfield on the outskirts of the capital, and there's been heavy fighting there with Ukrainian special forces. In the south, Russian troops invaded from Crimea, while the key port of Odessa was shelled heavily before Russian amphibious commandos came ashore from boats. It's been a lightning assault in the first 24 hours. Georgie.
Indeed. Lizzie, thank you. Let's now go to our Europe correspondent, Brett McLeod, who is at Downing Street in London. And Brett, this is a European invasion of a type we haven't seen since World War II. What is the next step for EU leaders?
Yes, Georgia, London certainly knows what it's like to come under aerial attack from a hostile European neighbour. Many thought that had been left behind in the 20th century, though. Boris Johnson will be joining other NATO leaders in a meeting, but that's not happening for a few more hours yet, by which time it could come far too late for any assistance for Kiev. A lot of Baltic states, former Soviet satellites, now part of NATO, very concerned about where Vladimir Putin's guns could be trained next after Ukraine. Georgie.
OK, Brett McLeod, thank you. Now to Canberra and Nine's political editor Chris Uhlmann. Chris, there are concerns this war could have repercussions much closer to home.
Yes, Georgie. Today the Prime Minister lashed out at China for easing trade restrictions against Russia as the West imposes sanctions for its unprovoked attack on Ukraine. The Defence Minister also joined the assault, saying Moscow and Beijing had formed an unholy alliance, and he called on the Chinese president to use his influence to end the war. It's a sign that the government believes a recent pact forged between Russia and China poses a long-term threat to our region. Australia's political leaders are united in demanding the world exact a toll on Russia for waging war against Ukraine.
There must be a cost, there must be a price, and it must be imposed by the global community.
It's important that the entire world act against this aggression.
Sanctions will be extended beyond Russian banks and officials to its neighbour and ally Belarus, and the Prime Minister wants all sporting links severed.
The F1 should not be held. It should not be held in Russia.
While the target is Moscow, Beijing is also in Canberra's sights for refusing to condemn the invasion.
There's one leader in the world, frankly, who can exert pressure on President Putin, and that is President Xi.
And China has lifted restrictions on Russian wheat imports as the West imposes bans.
You don't go and throw a lifeline to Russia in the middle of a period when they're invading another country.
Vladimir Putin met Xi Jinping during the Winter Olympics, where the two deepened their bonds in a landmark joint statement that said the friendship between the two states has no limits.
China and Russia have entered into this, frankly, unholy alliance.
The Prime Minister has dubbed the axis between Moscow and Beijing a coalition of autocracies that threatens the world.
I've been warning about this for years.
Yesterday, the new Chinese ambassador offered an olive branch to mend the fractured relationship.
China is willing to work with Australia to meet each other halfway.
Last year, the Chinese embassy handed Nine News a list of 14 grievances against Australia. Among them are demands that Australian MPs and its media stop criticising Beijing. The Prime Minister says he's not going to bargain away Australia's freedom.
In terms of meeting halfway, there are 14 points. I don't agree with changing any of them.
There's a hot war in Ukraine and a new Cold War is spreading across the globe. Chris Uhlmann, 9 News.
Hundreds of Ukrainian nationals have gathered across Sydney today in a sign of solidarity for their friends and family back home. Many shared stories of helplessness, watching from afar as relatives shared videos of bombings and evacuations.
15,000 kilometres away, Martin Place awash with patriotism and pain.
Our house got bombed. We don't have a house anymore. We don't have a home anymore. And we can't do anything about it.
Anna Biladin's uncle is on the front line.
He's walking around the streets and there's just dead bodies on the floor.
There's a helplessness watching from Sydney as their families come under attack. Anton Bogdanovic organised the rally to put pressure on the government as explosions ripped through the Kiev street where he grew up.
My parents woke up in the middle of the night from the sounds of explosions. One of such missiles landed in the backyard of my brother's house.
Making her way through the crowd, a lone Russian in a red dress.
I'm against Putin and I'm against his regime. I'm supporting Ukraine with all of my heart.
At St Andrew's Church in Lidcombe, tears and grief for a homeland at war.
O Lord great and almighty, protect our beloved Ukraine.
The Ukrainian community united in their fear.
Please help us, help us. We can't do this Russian army only alone.
And their defiance.
Ukraine doesn't want a war. It's Putin who wants war.
Andrew Menzinsky's late father fled the Red Army as a little boy in 1945. Yesterday, his niece Pixie Schmigel did the same.
The airlines were closed down, communications disappeared. Pixie somehow managed to grab a car and drove all the way to Poland overnight.
She was one of the lucky ones who managed to get out, but many have relatives now trapped.
Many of the people here today have built a life in Australia because of conflict, and now they're watching it unfold again. What they desperately want is more help from the Australian government to bring their loved ones still stuck in Ukraine here to safety.
I brought my grandparents here 2 months ago, and my one question is, can we please get them a visa? Can we please keep them here? I can't send them back.
Sophie Walsh, 9 News.